Carrie Alvarez is back, and I'm here to wonder aloud. Were we too hard on Chris McIntosh? Still, it's scary liking a subscription before we get launched here today. But, I'm going to raise my hand. I'm going to answer, from my perspective, what I think the answer is. But if you go back to mostly let's say the middle section of last football season in 2025, there were a lot of opinions, obviously, on Luke Fickell, and a lot of them were tethered very strongly to opinions about Chris McIntosh, the man who hired Fickell back in 2022. And I'll own this. I had some pretty strong opinions on the job Chris McIntosh was doing, mostly relating to football, but with some other stuff bleeding in. I've been a very virulent pro guard guy, so that's not one of them. But yeah, he was ready to be run out of town on a rail, and then he doubled down on Fickell, at least for the 2026 season. We'll see how it goes, and proceeded to, it appears, secure some legitimately impressive NIL funding that looks to be mostly going to football. And I think the transfer portal back in January for the Badger football team seems to be bearing fruit. Landing Colton Joseph, depending on who you talk to, that's a multiple $1 million contract. Wisconsin was a big player. There were, again, these are not confirmed rumors, but there were rumors that with some of the guys who signed off the record said, we're going to beat anyone who offers you. You can do the mental gymnastics on who that might apply to, but what it does lead to a conclusion of is that Wisconsin is becoming, I think, a little bit late, but better late than never, a player in NIL, at least with football. But in my sort of interim evaluation of Chris McIntosh here, heading into April of 2026, I'm going to go through several of the sports, not every sport, but several of the sports to kind of give a lay of the land for the things he has or hasn't done. And then I will give you my conclusion. I think I probably tipped my hand on what that conclusion is, but it's probably going to be at least a little bit different than it was last October on McIntosh. Been some things have happened since then. A couple of things I just alluded to. But anyway, let's start with basketball. We talked about football. We'll dip back into football, but let's talk about men's basketball, because this is kind of the flashpoint right now. You have a significant, I wouldn't say a majority, but a significant percentage of the fan base who, and I think we're all disappointed with March results. There's no question. No question. Losing to High Point, even a good High Point team that could have upset just about anyone. It's just another year where we didn't do it, guys. We have the team ready for a run. It's a run I think they would have made. I think they would have not probably, but certainly could have beaten Arkansas. They weren't going to beat Arizona. That's fine. But the Sweet 16 would have made a difference. But backing up to a 10,000-foot view, this was yet another successful regular season Greg Gard basketball team. This was a fifth-place Big Ten team, a very impressive 14-6 record. The best conglomeration of high-end wins of any team in the country. Even heading into the Final Four now, I maintain that is true still. When you got Michigan on the road, a Final Four Illinois team twice out of two, at Purdue, who was an Elite Eight team, it's just, Michigan State, you handled Iowa, who almost made the Final Four. I mean, we can talk about that another day, whether Iowa was really a better team this year. They weren't. But Greg Gard, again, it's almost like he's a victim of his own success. I think if he had, gone 500 in the Big Ten, squeaked in as an 11 or a 12 seed, and then lost, there'd be other complaints, maybe broader complaints, but it wouldn't be as raw as it was when a team he thinks is going to make a run with Blackwell and Boyd kind of leaves you at the altar. It was rough, but what has Greg Gard done? I mean, and I understand some of this was accomplished with those guys that he recruited, but you just got to look. He's at 10 seasons. It's been a long time since he made the Sweet 16. His NCAA tournament stuff has not been great, but he is unquestionably a legitimate, solid, upper-tier Big Ten basketball coach. The numbers bear it out, guys, on his winning percentage and his results. That's a fact. And maybe even more importantly for the future, he has proven over the past 3 seasons, again with the caveat that it has not translated to March success, although I think it probably should have a couple times. It didn't. He's proven he can adapt in the NIL era. And in an era where kids don't want to go places where they're grinding out 54, 53 wins, he has completely overhauled Wisconsin's offense and defense over the course of the last 3 years. That is indisputable. And the results outside of games played in the NCAA tournament have been unequivocally a success. This was one of the best offensive teams this season, one of the most fun teams to watch this season. When you could just eat Bo Ryan for all his success. Yeah, 2014, 2015, that was a fun team to watch. But the average Bo Ryan team wasn't fun to watch unless you're a Badger fan who really appreciated the tough, hard-nosed defense and a very patient swing offense. They won games mostly with defense. That's a fact. Not as much as they did with Dick Bennett, but a pretty defensive squad. Wisconsin is now a fun team to watch. Maybe not always for the fans, but when they lose games like they did with High Point. But if you're a recruit or a transfer portal guy, and you have Greg Gard and Kravenhoff sitting in your living room, and they're saying, "Come play for the Badgers. We're fun." Yeah, you might have some reservations about the fact that they haven't made a Sweet 16 in a long time, but these transfer kids and these recruits who are 17 years old, they're probably thinking a little less about that, a little more like, I can average 20 points for this team and be, a legitimate, get a spotlight on my skills. This is a fun team to play for. I think Greg Gard has a legitimate chance at some of these high-end Wisconsin 2027 players that 4 years ago, when you're winning games 42-41, you're not going to get these guys. There's a chance. So kind of 10,000-foot view, I think it is impossible to say that Greg Gard does not have this basketball program in a good place. And, you can say NCAA tournament stuff, and that's not okay. I'm not making excuses for it. I keep saying it's unacceptable, but it kind of is where I made this argument with Ben McCollum, the Iowa coach. Incredibly impressive getting to the Elite Eight this year. I'm not taking a thing away from him. Ben McCollum had a 10-10 Big Ten team who finished 9th place. Not a special season, remotely special season, the regular season, which, if you're going to say what you accomplished over 4 months versus what you accomplished over 8 days, which means more, you can make the argument the tournament means more. And I think it's not an unreasonable argument, but which is more indicative of where a program is. There is no question that the McCollum Elite Eight run was fluky compared to what he put up over the course of a season. That's a fact. So looking at that, you can say that a tough, devastating loss to High Point was fluky relative to what Gard put up over the course of 4 months, because it is. It sounds like I'm making excuses. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying where the program is. People are telling Chris McIntosh to fire this guy. And McIntosh, to his credit, I don't think he has seriously even, modestly entertained it. I think he's even modestly entertained it, guys. Greg Gard, this is Greg Gard's program. And you just got to hope it's going to pop through. But if it doesn't pop through in March, it's not because they're not playing the right style or don't have talented players or don't have a coach who's proven he's one of the top winning percentages in Big Ten history. It just has to change. I don't know, but firing him, I see people, this is what's so ironic to me. They say, look at Iowa. They went and grabbed a, non-power 4, non-power 5 coach, and look, why doesn't McIntosh do that? That is exactly what he did with Luke Fickell. Not even, it's crazy. And then look what happened with that. And the person we're going to talk about in a second, the most criticized aspect of Chris McIntosh's job is the Luke Fickell hire. And you're telling him to do the exact same thing with a proven winner in Greg Gard. I just don't understand it, guys. What myopia. But anyway, that's men's basketball. I spent a lot of time on it. This is going to be a little longer than normal, but women's basketball. Okay, not a big revenue sport, but hired Coach Robin, most recently at Missouri in the SEC, and she brought a renewed energy to the program this year. There's no question. They're heading to the Final Four of it's not the most prestigious tournament, but it's a postseason tournament, and they had 3 very impressive wins over solid teams to get there. They've had a lot of fun, close games this year. Ending the Big Ten season on a multiple game losing streak, not good, guys, not great at all, and bouncing out of the Big Ten tournament. But there was no question this is the best Wisconsin women's basketball season in a long time. You can make an argument it's the best since 2010. Now, the bar is not high, and she will be expected to win games and make the NCAA tournament in the next couple of years. But I feel pretty good about that hire from Chris McIntosh right now. I feel like this is a team that's been fun. It's been fun to watch, with some bad losses, no question. But I like the late season run a lot. So we'll say the jury's out on this one, but the early returns on Coach Robin are pretty good. So that's a good one for Mac. Women's hockey, I feel like it's the Teflon. Don't mess with what's working. Mark Johnson, he was hired obviously long before McIntosh. Leave it alone. That program has kept humming. Just won its 3rd national title in 4 seasons. If you want to criticize an athletic director, whether he hired the coach or not, for the lack of success for a given team, you have to give them some flowers when the team is good too. It's fact, because funding goes into that. NIL goes into that. There are things behind the scenes that McIntosh and his staff has resources he's given Mark Johnson that we don't see. No, it's not multi-million-dollar contracts for players like it is in big sports, but you have to give McIntosh at least some credit for Wisconsin women's hockey rather. So there's that. Wisconsin men's hockey. This is another flashpoint. This was another one when they were slumping after a bad season last year, and they had a 6-game losing streak in the second half of the Big Ten season this year, where a lot of people were jumping on saying, "Got to fire Hastings," who McIntosh hired a couple years ago. This is Hastings' 3rd season, and I will say I've been pretty pro Hastings from the beginning. I thought last year was an anomaly, a 13-23 season, all kinds of injuries, some bad goaltending play, and that's on Hastings. You got to own the team that you put on the ice. But I feel like the first year was a bit of a surprise when they were basically a top 10 team all season and lost early in the NCAA tournament. So this year was a real referendum, I think, and they had a good mix of young and old. They had a much better goalie play, and they're in the final Frozen Four, guys. Mike Hastings has his team in the Frozen Four for the first time in 20 seasons. Hastings is a Chris McIntosh hire out of Minnesota State. There it is, guys. That is an unequivocal win for Chris McIntosh in a hire. And you cannot argue otherwise. So you got to put that in the pipe if you're smoking it and see where that lays. But congratulations to the Badgers and good luck in the Frozen Four. So we're going to kind of take down the list here. Volleyball, a little bit like women's hockey. Kelly Sheffield was in place already. It's a machine that's going down the track. It's an elite program, doing great. The success has been, there was a national title when McIntosh was an AD. Is it his national title? Yeah, he's the AD. He did it. But he's kept Sheffield around. He has, if you believe the reports, given Sheffield increasingly solid resources with which to build his teams, both through the portal and through recruiting. And two very popular, well-regarded volleyball publications have the 26 Wisconsin recruiting class as the number 1 class in college volleyball. Not Nebraska, not Louisville, Wisconsin. And that bodes very well. Wisconsin, of course, as you know, another Final Four appearance just this past season. Very disappointing loss to Kentucky in the Final Four, but they're there again. This is an elite program. And it's an elite program under McIntosh's watch. He's retained Sheffield and given them the resources. You can't say he has nothing to do with it. If Wisconsin went off the rails last season and crashed out and didn't make the NCAA tournament in volleyball, I can guarantee you we would have heard this as Chris McIntosh's fault, even though he didn't hire Kelly Sheffield. So let's give him the credit for that too. Another solid winning program. Women's soccer, men's soccer. Outside of women's soccer, Wilkins is an institution. She's been in Wisconsin since 2007, regularly makes the NCAA tournament, has not had deep runs, but a really, really solid top quartile of the Big Ten soccer team. again, not McIntosh's hire, but it's a successful program. He did hire Neil Jones a couple years back in the men's program. His track record for the Badgers, although I really liked the hire at the time, it's been spotty. They've been a 500 kind of team, have not made the NCAA tournament under Jones's watch. That's one to keep an eye on. I think next year is going to be a kind of a prove-it year for him. So that's on McIntosh, and we'll see how it goes. I am unfamiliar with the money that is or is not given to the NCAA soccer programs at Wisconsin. I'll be honest with you, but it's not a disaster. Track and cross country, they continue to be awesome. There are issues with their training facilities that you could call a black mark on Chris McIntosh, given that their previous training facilities were destroyed without new ones instituted. That's a whole nother podcast. But so I think the results there are a little bit TBD, but the performance of the teams has been, as it usually is, very, very impressive. Softball, Yvette Healy, we had a period there where she had 4 NCAA tournaments in a 7-year period, has not gone the last 3, but that's a competitive, solid program out there. They did not fall off the table since McIntosh got one on the scene. And there are more programs. I'm not going to go into all the other ones, but those are the major ones that we talked about. And then it leaves with football. So ad nauseum, we've talked about Luke Fickell, but at the time, McIntosh was given the flowers by every major publication, broadcaster, podcast, that it was a complete coup that he hired Luke Fickell. We can try and reconstruct this, and everyone says, oh, what a disaster. That hire was 90% positive, 10% negative when it happened. The only people who didn't like it in Wisconsin were the kind of pro-Christ, pro-old regime. We're going to change things. And really, part of them have been proven correct, given that Fickell now he's taken 4 years to do it, or 3, going into his 4th season to do it, but said, what things worked? Let's lock down the big beefing guys at Wisconsin and do kind of a run-first offense. It took too long to do that, unfortunately, but I feel like 2026 is a prove-it year to see if that can, in fact, continue to win in modern football. But the 2027 class that Luke Fickell and his recruiting staff is building is right now all Wisconsin kids. Is this an overcorrection? I don't think so, because these guys they're landing are high-end dudes like Coors Loken and some of these other linemen, and they're in on a bunch of other guys. And this happens to be a really well-regarded Wisconsin state of Wisconsin high school, with a bunch of 4-star kind of guys. So, I have been, I wouldn't say as critical as anyone, but I've been reasonably critical of the job Fickell did. There were points last season where I thought Wisconsin should have moved on from him. That's irrelevant now because they did not. Doesn't matter what I think. And there were signs after that, including the wins against ranked Washington, ranked Illinois, that showed what this team could potentially be. So, yes, I think, not to bury the lead too much, I think Luke Fickell and the Wisconsin football program is obviously going to be a disproportionately large section of how we evaluate AD McIntosh, but there are some green shoots sprouting through the concrete right now, including wildly increased NIL funding, as I noted, and a much more favorable schedule in 2026, where I'm not going to write this team off, guys. I'm not going to make any bold predictions like some people are. I don't know if this is a 5-7 team or this is a 9-3 team. I don't know. It's going to depend on a lot of things, including health. But AD McIntosh has presided over, I think, 3 years of what could be best called a modest disaster. But heading into this 4th season, that NIL funding has skyrocketed. And that doesn't happen if the AD is not involved in it. So I guess it's kind of a TBD on that, which makes it kind of a TBD on the whole on how McIntosh is doing. But I did think it was important to take a program by program look at where he is and his hires and things like that. And it's hard to make an argument he's been a terrible athletic director. I mean, unless you put all the chips in football and have decided that the Fickell hire is the beginning, middle, and end of things he has done, and then you would have to conclude that it has not been successful. But I just think when I sat down and actually looked at the numbers and looked how the teams are doing, controlling for revenue and non-revenue, Wisconsin athletic department is in good shape right now as far as the success of its teams on the court, on the field, on the rink. It's a good athletic department. I don't have the cup standings in front of us where they do the full athletic department results, but we're a top 10 men's and women's program, for certainly women's, in the country. And does that happen if a Boza was presiding over it as athletic director in an era where money has never been more important and strategic focus has never been more important? No, it doesn't happen. So maybe it's a question of maturing and learning on the job. And I am not going to say that McIntosh has not made mistakes. Some of the, the way he talks to the media, there are PR things that I cringe about in the way he has approached things, and I continue to feel that way. But I do think the jury, where I thought he was in over his head and was probably maybe not the right guy for it, I have a little bit of pause on that now, and I really would like to see how this football season goes before making any more bold pronouncements. But I do think there are objective things on this guy's resume now where he can point to and say, hey, I'm doing pretty well, and he's not wrong. Love to hear your comments. This is kind of more of a controversial one, so let me know what you think. And Scary Alvarez is out.